Welcome. We're joining in the idea of reflections of our thoughts, our mind, using here the faculty of our Christ mind, the faculty of that connection and communication with the Holy Spirit, with the Spirit within our heart of hearts, our direct communication with God, isn't it? And this is also where we find ourselves in the mind training of A Course in Miracles. If you are here with me starting on the 1st of January or having started and being in the practice of lesson 49, tomorrow 50, those are concluding the first 50 lessons, which are absolutely a basic core of the change of perspective in order to come to that clarity that what is seen with the eyes, with the senses, that has made up, or I have made it up, an objective reality doesn't have any meaning whatsoever, but there is meaning, and that meaning is in the Spirit, is in God. So therefore, this re-establishment of communication has become a priority, has become a necessity in our not just self-reflection and meditative and prayerful thoughts, but especially in our relationship within the world, with each other as human beings. Because when we realize that we are not really communicating here in time space, but we do communicate truly in His mind and through His mind, and that is through the Holy Spirit, then we are literally and truly listening to what the power of mind, which we will have a look today also in the reference as we find it at the beginning of this course in chapter 2. We will have a look what Jesus is saying to that in this original text that He has given to the world, to you, to me, and so, of course, to Helen Schackman and Bill Tedford. And in that lesson 49, he gives us the practice to it of really listening, really sink deep within our mind and listen to a voice that is not reflecting the chatter of ego thoughts, of perceptual judgments put in categories in order to tell ourselves, well, I know what is. The truth is, I don't know, and you don't know either. But we know that everything is for our own best interests. First, we start that we do not know what serves our best interest. But then we realize through that communication that everything that we made up in our mind, that we invented, and were calling it something as an aspect of ourself, of the self-concept, and therefore a reflection and aspect of what this world is made of. And so we have to just remember with which mind, which thought system we are using when we think, when we communicate, when we relate to each other. And that is the mind training of A Course in Miracles. And from that perspective on, of course, we can go and we can celebrate and we can say, yes, exactly how he expresses it here in this lesson 49. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. That the part of your mind in which truth abides is in constant communication with God, whether you are aware of it or not. See, it has nothing to do with that. Of course, it's part of the asking and part of the awakening that you will be shown that you are not that what you are aware of, but you literally that awareness of the awareness of your perceptual world, which is literally that light of your mind that reflects the power of mind that is God's mind. And he continues saying that that there's this other part, right, that demonstrates or tries to sell you this other thought system we call the ego thought system. No? It is the other part of your mind that functions in the world and obeys the world's laws. And it is this part that is constantly distracted, disorganized, and highly uncertain. So here are the choices, right? Here are the choices that each and every one of us is guided to have a look at it and then to choose a new each and every moment. Ne? And so the part that is listening to the voice for God is calm, is always at rest, that rest, that is a resting in God, that is the awareness of the experience of the peace of God within ourselves. And that part is also wholly certain. The Holy Spirit and your mind in that alignment with His mind is wholly certain. And it's really the only part there is. And this is the good news. So we don't need to fight against the ego thought system, because that part that is listening to the voice for God, that is in communication with God, is the only part there is. And the other part is, and again, he makes a kind of a list: wild illusion, frantic, distraught, but without reality of any kind. And so that's really where that loud, obsessive voice that is demonstrated in the experience of pain that represents the ego's voice is first so real and then is silenced in our mind through that connection, through that communication. And part of that lesson is also that invitation to that experience, to listen in deep silence, to be very still, and to open your mind. Following these instructions, we go past that voice of the ego, all these raucous shrieks and sick imaginings that cover our real thoughts and obscure our eternal link with God. We sink deep into the peace that waits for us beyond these frantic, righteous thoughts and sights and sounds of this insane world. We do experience and recognize in this experience that we are not living here, as he expresses it in the next sentence. You are not from here. You do not live here. So let's just for a moment sink deep into that experience, realizing that we are in God's mind and not here in the world in perceptual reality. And you see there is power in that presence, the presence of God within you. There is strength. And we are taking this strength to have an experience, a successful experience of the full transformation of our mind. As Jesus says in the beginning of the text also, that you must join the great crusade to correct error. We need this strength in order to utilize a motivation that comes from a power that is not of this world, in order to listen to my voice, he says, learn to undo error and act to correct it. This is why we come together and we join also in ideas as they are presented in our reasonable whole mind in communication with the Holy Spirit. And in your willingness to listen and to sink deep within your mind and go past all these meaningless thoughts, you're literally waking up to that certainty, how blessed you are, how taken care of you are. That it is not the sustenance of the world that can sustain you or will sustain you. It is the love of God. I am sustained by the love of God, is the title of lesson 50. And it is that expression that now our faith is placed no longer in the most trivial and insane symbols, as he calls it, those ideas of being safe in the dream, in the world. And he lists them: bills, money. Money is used as an idea of security, isn't it? Protective clothing. Every human being has this need of warmth, not just those who live right now in the northern hemisphere. Influence, that power within the ego thinking, prestige, being liked, knowing the right people, It's all about these ideas of being safe, being secure, being comfortable. An endless list of forms of nothingness that you endow with magical powers. This is the time where we come from a true strength in which we no longer need to place trust or faith in what the ego offers. This is real progress. This is a real experience within ourselves that reflects that listening to his voice, that communication with him. Only the love of God will protect you in all circumstances. It will lift you out of every trial, raise you high above all the perceived dangers of this world into a climate of perfect peace and safety. It will transport you into a state of mind that nothing can threaten, nothing can disturb, and where nothing can intrude upon the eternal calm of the Son of God. We are sharing that certainty in our coming together, in our giving ourselves away to the world of our making, into demonstrating in our relationships that on such basis, there's only love there. Love for each other based on love of God. And he makes also the expression that through this love of God, we are able, because this love of God is within us, we are able to resolve all seeming difficulties without effort and ensure confidence. We are released from all aspects of idols that we were holding up and literally holding against our own wholeness, recognition of wholeness. And with this serenity and peace that we experience within ourselves, it becomes very easy and reasonable to be open-minded and invite that voice to teach us, to guide us, to direct us, where in the mind it still needs a conversion, a looking at limitation, and letting that convert, change to wholeness. The power of mind is that power that comes from that listening, that comes from that certainty that God gives security, safety, and sustenance. And not nowhere in the world can that be found. It is within us. It is within your mind, not in the world. And if you're continuing and looking where we left it the last time, and we were looking at this in 2 episodes as these different aspects of the correction of fear, and now in that allowance, in that experiencing, to be freed of this, liberated of this fear of the human separate split mind, out of a sudden that power is realized and experienced. And I will also read you something. As you know, I'm making this cross references, telling you where we are in the edited version of the book that is from the Foundation published or from other editions. And that is like in chapter 2, the 6th section at the very end, the last paragraph. But I'm reading those sources also that reflect the original text as we can find it in the complete and annotated version of A Course in Miracles. And I will even go and give you some phrases how Helen Schuckman herself in her notes wrote down and commented some sections which can only be found in these original notes as she received it. And so in the complete and annotated version, we are in chapter 2, section, it's the, and I'm not going to tell you something wrong, section 10, and we're starting out there with the first paragraph. And it starts out with, everyone experiences fear and nobody enjoys it. Yet it would take very little right thinking to know why the curse. And between these sentences and the next one, that very few people appreciate the real power of the mind, and nobody remains fully aware of it all the time. Helen Schuckman had a conversation written down. She made her notes, which are not even in the complete and annotated version, but I will read them to you. They are here in the notes in parentheses written. And so when Jesus then said, neither you or Bill, neither you have thought about it very much either, that everyone experiences fear, nobody enjoys it, yet it would take very little right thinking to know why it occurs. And here comes an expression that shows also where Helen Schuckman, even by that receiving and being the channel of that incredible message, had doubts, expressed her resistance. So she said, she writes here, I object at this point to the use of plural verb with a properly singular subject. So she is basically in communication with Jesus about that. And remember that last time in a very similar sentence, he said it correctly, and I remembered it with real pleasure. This real grammatical error makes me suspicious of the genuineness of these notes. So she's doubting that receiving the information by him, of his mind. Now, here comes the answer that she also noted down, still part of what is written in the notes in parentheses. What it really shows is that you are not very receptive. The reason it came out that way is because you are projecting in the inappropriate way your own anger, which has nothing to do with these notes. You made the error because you are not feeling loving. So you want me to sound silly. So you won't have to pay attention. Actually, I'm trying to get through against considerable opposition because you are not very happy and I wish you were. I thought I would take a chance even though you are so resistant because I might be able to make you feel better. You may be unable not to attack at all, but do try to listen a little too. I love it because it is quite a correction, right? It is quite an alignment that he does here with her, and basically just shows her that there's no mistake coming from his mind, but however she chooses to feel about herself and what emotions she wants to experience herself in, not feeling very loving or expressing and projecting her own anger, that is what makes up those grammatical errors. And from there, they just move on and with the dictation. But those things, of course, everyone who receives messages has to, in that sense, heal for himself, no? Or get out of the way, we could say. No? It doesn't do any good to stay in the way um, and battle or fight with the source of the information received. But we have to get out of the way and really, go along in that alignment of the mind, thinking with that Holy Spirit that has absolutely all clarity what needs to be communicated and in which expression it is then heard by those who choose to listen to that in that moment, which is right now. No? And so it continued then, very few people appreciate the real power of the mind. So this is what we reflect today also. And nobody remains fully aware of it all the time. This is inevitable in this world because the human being has many things he must do and cannot engage in constant thought watching. However, if he hopes to spare himself from fear, there are some things he must realize and realize fully, at least some of the time. So, if he hopes to spare himself from fear. So, let's see how he approaches that, because he will demonstrate that this is all accomplished through allowing that power, that true power of mind, come forth. So, of course, we have used that power in the human consciousness in innumerable ways, and he will go later on to those aspects. And that's why I put in the title also that it is about reflections of thinking big. That is like an expression that is used in the world, and nobody is really aware of it, that it is projected onto a limited outcome. To think big means, okay, I'm just thinking way bigger than in the limitation of where I was holding myself in a limited experience. But thinking big in a just bigger version is still on that level in time, space, and within the level of conceptual mind. When we utilize the entire power of mind, we're making that step beyond the conceptual mind. We're literally entering into the mind of the Holy Spirit, into God's mind. So here he does express that very few people appreciate the real power of the mind, and nobody remains fully aware of it all the time. The mind is a very powerful agent. Originally, he used, instead of what was here used as agent, he used the word creator. But I think it's absolutely appropriate that we keep in that understanding, so that it doesn't come to too much confusions. We are using the word creator and creation only for thinking with God, and not for anything that just opens the mind to a greater version, as the thinking big is part of it. So I think it's very appropriate to just say the mind is a very powerful agent, and it never loses its creative force. It never sleeps. See, here is that powerful thinking is still using its creative force that comes from creation itself. Or I would always say, we are still using the light of heaven in order to see and perceive the world as it appears. Like, that is the making up of the world. That is the inventing images. Mind never sleeps. Every instant it is making or creating. See, here it is clarified. We're talking about making or creating. And always as you will, always as the mind chooses. How you choose what your will is. Many of your ordinary expressions reflect this. For example, when you say, don't give it a thought, you're implying that if you do not think about something, it will have no effect on you. This is true enough. On the other hand, many other expressions are clear expressions of the prevailing lack of awareness of thought power. Lack of awareness of thought power. For example, you say, just an idle thought, and mean that the thought has no effect. You also speak of some actions as thoughtless, implying that if the person had thought, he would not have behaved as he did. Now, he was doing this thoughtlessly. You also use phrases like thought provoking, which is bland enough, but the term a provoking thought means something quite different. While expressions like, and here it comes, think big, give some recognition of the power of thought, they still come nowhere near the truth. And this is what I want you today to really hear, because of course we find in our communications with minds that are already not just seeking for the truth, but teaching themselves, expressing themselves what they believe is the truth for them, or what they experienced brought for them personally a better experience, a higher experience, a more fulfilling experience, maybe more money, right? Maybe seeing more friendship and peace around them. So, but mostly this term of thinking big is reduced of making a better business, becoming richer, making more money, and being more successful in the world. No? But here he clarifies it, and this is what we really have to hear, because there are thousands of course, of approaches offered in the teachings of the world. No? There are millions and thousands of people out there offering you ways of thinking big. No? They still come nowhere near the truth. Yeah, these expressions of thinking big. We are here and using A Course in Miracles because we are not just happy to think big, but we want the truth, and we are here to represent the truth by literally thinking with Him and not just thinking big. You do not expect to grow when you say it because you really don't believe it. It is hard to recognize that thought and belief combine into a power surge which can literally move mountains. So here expresses also what is in the Bible, in Matthew, right? If you have faith as a grain of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. So it is a demonstration that if you apply the power of mind, the power of his mind, there are no limitations to your thinking. And you could even add on to that example and that picture as it is given in the Bible. It would be the least that you could do is to move mountains, right? Because it is still within the perceptual realm. But if we are expressing and extending the creative power of our mind, it's not about any more of a change within the objective reality. It's not about a change that is perceived in the world. It is really about God presence. It appears at first glance that to believe such power about yourself is merely arrogant, but that is not the real reason why you don't believe it. People prefer to believe that their thoughts cannot exert real control because they are literally afraid of them. And you might have noticed that that was also reflecting your own mind. And of course, that's where we come from. And we have just spent the last 2 episodes about the correction of fear. No? Therapists, he continues, try to help people who are afraid of their own death wishes. Yeah, to help people who are afraid of their own death wishes by depreciating the power of the wish. They even attempt to, under quotes, free the patient by persuading him that he can think whatever he wants without any real effect at all. There's a real dilemma here, which only the truly right-minded can escape. because we know, of course, that we are not alone in experiencing the effects of our seeing, and we are not alone in experiencing the effects of our thoughts. So as long as there is not the complete certainty of the meaninglessness, or the world I see isn't even there, this wouldn't work, So that's why he adds on that only the truly right-minded can escape that dilemma. Death wishes do not kill in the physical sense, but they do kill spiritually. All destructive thinking is dangerous. All destructive thinking is dangerous. Thank you. Given a death wish, a person has no choice except to act upon his thought or behave contrary to it. He can thus choose only between homicide and fear. See previous notes on will conflicts. The other possibility is that he depreciates the power of his thought. This is the usual psychoanalytic approach. Interesting, isn't it? And we know here, and it is expressed also all those who are in psychoanalysis, that this is the Freudian approach. So to depreciate the power of his thought. This does ally guilt, but at the cost of rendering thinking impotent. If you believe that what you think is ineffectual, you may cease to be overly afraid of it, but you are hardly likely to respect it either. The world is full of endless examples of how people have depreciated themselves because they are afraid of their own thoughts. In some forms of insanity, thoughts are glorified, but this is only because the underlying depreciation was too effective for tolerance. Wow. Okay, let's do one more paragraph for today. The truth is that there are no idle thoughts. And we have that also in there are no neutral thoughts. And in the lesson 15 and 16, where Jesus teaches us that, because the truth is also we do not have private thoughts. And so thoughts are powerful by that meaning that we have given to them. All thinking produces form at some level. The reason why people are afraid of ESP, and so whatever that means, I have no idea, and so often react against it, is because they know that thoughts can hurt them. Their own thoughts have made them vulnerable. So that is very important to admit that. And if we see that there is still the belief in the hurtful power of thought, then of course fear is real, and and it needs again this undoing process, this correction of fear on the level where it has been made real in the mind. And this is what the mind training is for. It is not just offering you the perspective of, okay, how holy you are, and that you are just love and peace and God's son. But it really goes with our mind into these thoughts of denial, and lets us have another look so that we can choose anew. And that this choice is then really one of, okay, I have no use of this anymore. There is another way of looking at this. I could see peace instead of this. So it continues then, you who complain about fear still persist in producing it most of the time. I told you in the last section that you cannot ask me to release you from it because I know it doesn't exist. You don't. If I merely intervened between your thoughts and their results, I would be tempered with a basic law of cause and effect. In fact, the most fundamental one there is in this world. I would hardly help you if I had appreciated the power of your own thinking. This would be in direct opposition to the purpose of this course. So this paragraph is already the first paragraph in the edited version, called then Cause and Effect, the seventh section of chapter 2. But you see here also Jesus gives us back that the power of our mind and says, hey, of course, it would be possible for me to free you completely up from fear, but I cannot do it because I cannot go against your own willpower. It is the power in your own mind, and you choose by the power of how you want to experience yourself, how you believe who you are. And if fear is still a necessary part of that experience, then you have to first go along and see what that offers you, so that you make a strong decision to not have any use of this anymore, and to be willing to release yourself from that. Yeah, this is beautiful. And of course, again, the lessons as we shared them are the real help to listen to the voice of God that speaks to us all through the day, and to see that that power and strength is there, is in our mind. And of course, we will arrive to acknowledge that anything that is part of our human experience doesn't have anything to do with reality. It is of our own making, this world, right? And doesn't exist as he expresses it. I want to just share with you one, two paragraphs from the book 3 Days to Awakening, Day 1, first volume. And I'm guided here to page 152 and start here in the middle. Truth is, none of what you perceive was or is real now. There is no perceiver of something in your divine self, in the divine man, in God. And there's no cause and effect relationship in time between God and you. God is the cause of you, and you are eternally his effect. See, and that is the truth, but that is different the moment it is about one's own making, one's own fabrication, because there the cause and the effect are separated. And so the mind that suffers of the effect hasn't closed the gap of cause and effect yet. It is not a relationship, so true cause and true effect. It's not a relationship, but a simultaneous choice happening as one reality, an instant of sharing the creative thought forever and forever. Being yourself, the presence of all in the thought of creative light, is what pure awareness of your conscious awareness is. You being aware of something illusory is nothing. You can truly only perceive this light because you are it and nothing else. Now let's listen to this. Here's the conversion offered. All things here as sounds, forms, sensations, emotions, feelings, associated thought forms were released along with me, were released along with the sense of I, with you as the concept of yourself. They are seen as changing and disappearing on their own according to how much of the power of mind is used for this conversion. False seeing is changed and eradicated by a systematic training of the mind in order to undo this basic error of giving anything in the world meaning. This false seeing does not mean anything, and without a meaning does not exist. You are literally perceiving nothing. This is the truth that you remember now. So here we have an example from where we are coming in our mind training, which we are bringing to the true seeing with Him, to a seeing in with vision of Christ, with the reasonable thought of the Holy Spirit. And there it is where we meet the true power of mind, because only there is truth. It's not in the meaning that I've given to you or to anything in the world. It's not in holding on to a certain meaning and telling myself I know what it is. It is in the power of mind. It is where the truth is. It is where I allow the truth to come forth and um, guiding me literally towards an experience of oneness, of singularity, of light, of peace, of joy, of love. And that's where we arrive every moment, if we so choose. That's where we are. That's where we abide. That's where we acknowledge we are. But without that undoing process, without that conversion of what was projected of our own making, it's not going to be more than a concept. And it might start with a concept, but we have to go all the way and literally release ourselves from all the meaning that we were giving ourselves or still holding on to. And there's true freedom. There we are in that experience of listening to His voice, of abiding in how the love of God sustains us in every circumstance, because it is a release. It's a declaration of release, he says, right? It is a release of the human condition. So with that, I just say thank you from the bottom of my heart for you being here and being attentive, following here this teaching that comes from the mind of Jesus Christ, that is really His guidance for all of us on the way home in our awakening. I love you with all my heart, and I see you everywhere, because this is what seeing with His mind is. Here we go.